So welcome, folks. Welcome to lesson number 5, dealing with debt. The Sabbath school lesson. We have Pastor Tom with us and his lovely wife, Linda. And we also have Ricky as well. And so we hope you guys enjoy the lesson today. I'm just going to hand it right over to you, Tom. I don't think there's really anything else to say.
Very good. So we're going to have a word of prayer to begin with. All right. Thank you, gracious Lord, as we look into this lesson. We just thank you that we have the opportunity to study, to understand, and to just share some insights that you've given. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, subject title. Linda, what's the subject title here?
Well, it's talking about debt, and that's a complicated topic. It's a very personal topic, and one that we like to just have a lot of space with, and don't mess with the money topic. But I I appreciate the approach of the lesson, that it's more some practical advice. And debt and money, it's not only just an economic thing, but it's a very it can have spiritual implications.
So what would be a definition of debt?
Credit card bills.
Yeah, like you're owing somebody money or a company money, or credit card bills, power bill,
car payments,
house payment, mortgage, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Borrowing from the future? Yeah.
Borrowing from the future, to pay it in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where we think we're going to have money coming in, but we're going to go ahead and spend it now in hopes and anticipation that it'll be here by Friday or next month.
And then when you get that money, though, it's like then you don't want to spend it on what you borrowed it from. It's like, I want this instead.
I know, you need it today, not from yesterday.
Yeah, it's planning on things in the future to be the same or better than it is today. Mm-hmm. And people do go in debt. There's lots of kinds of debts. But we're going to take a look at the scriptures and go from there. So let's take a look at our Bibles from Proverbs. That's a good one. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the servant to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. Does anybody here feel like a servant?
Yeah, sometimes.
We don't want to be a servant, and the Bible gave a real blessing to Israel to remind them that they were not to be a borrower, they were to be lenders. Mm-hmm. So we're going to look at 1 John chapter 2.
Oh, I thought we were doing. Oh, okay.
1 John chapter 2, verse 15. And this is Jesus' admonition. Comes from John. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Now, why would the lesson bring this up? It doesn't seem to have anything to do with debt. Why would they think that was an important text to bring up?
I would think like the love of the world and getting yourself in debt there's a commonality in that.
To get rich, we want
something we can't afford.
Yeah, it's the worldliness. We want that fifth wheel, that $40,000 fifth wheel, or that $80,000 truck, or I don't know.
Yeah, something we can't afford, so we need to borrow to be able to afford it. Yeah. And some people borrow just to get by.
So why would people want that?
To keep up with everyone else, so everyone else could see how good they're doing.
So you gain favor that way. Yeah.
It's an ego trip.
Oh, yeah. Well, we want to belong, and if everybody else has something, it was back in your teenage days. I remember when I was a kid, San Diego, the cool thing was to have a down jacket. But as dumb as you can imagine living in San Diego. But everybody had to have a down jacket. We went to school with our down jackets and our backpacking boots in San Diego.
San Diego, a down jacket, wow. Because what is it? It gets down to a whopping 60 degrees at times.
Yeah, pretty cold, probably, though. It's, is it, though, that we're just trying to fit in, though, with our stuff, or is it we're trying to be better? Because we're not really impressing people. You know, the more people see what we have and they don't have, they feel jealous.
Everybody wants to belong. So this text we just looked at, do not love the world or the things in the world. So what instead should we be loving? We'll look at verse 16. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the reason why we're looking at this text is because it's extremely important. And that is, if we can make our hearts right with God and recognize, like verse 17, the world is passing away and the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever. So if we can make sure that our hearts are right with God, then we are not going to be so tempted by things that we really don't need.
And if we are tempted, we'll get over it through him.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know, I get tempted all the time. It seems like it's still a struggle, but it does get better if we're focused on him.
So let's turn our Bibles to Deuteronomy chapter 28. This is a tremendous text when it comes to God's will for our lives.
Want me to read it?
Yes, 28. We've got verse 1 and 2, and then they have to jump to verse 12.
1, 2, and 12?
Yeah.
So now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you high above all nations of the earth. It only gave me one.
And then verse 2.
And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, because you obey the voice of the Lord your God. And 12.
Yes.
The Lord will open to you his good treasures, the heavens, to give the rain to your land in its seasons, and to bless all the work of your hand. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow.
Yeah, God really wants us to be successful. He's happy. He was happy when the children of Israel were successful.
Amen.
And you know how we want our kids to do well. Mm-hmm. We want them to not struggle, and I know that there's a struggle that can be helpful for our characters, but we're really proud of our kids and happy when they're doing well, and God is, I think, so much the same with us.
And probably so much more, actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
and he wants us to be those people that can be an example in all areas of our lives. And in this lesson, we've talked about, in the past number of lessons about different aspects of our lives that God wants to be king. To be king and Lord. And yet, I think that our money is an area that he longs to be king and Lord of. And he wants to see us be successful.
Amen.
And it's almost like, being a new Christian, and I know I kind of felt this way too when I came back into the church, when they start talking about tithe, when they start talking about money and how God wants to be Lord over, let's say, our wallet, there's almost like a how dare you emotion that rises up. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, first thing you're going for is my wallet, and it's kind of funny. I told this story a while back about my stepfather. He just came, when he just first came into the church, the very first thing that happened was Amazing Facts sent him a request for some money in the mail. And he was like, I haven't been a Christian for more than a week and they're already sending me stuff. I said, what's going on here? Well, he paid it. And then he has a testimony because of that too, because God had blessed him for doing this thing, and it gained a trust in him. But that's sort of what God is asking us, to step out so that we can trust.
I think the part about giving is often there's a sticker shock quality to it to new Christians. I won't say her full name, but Barbara, back down in our church when we were pastoring in Los Angeles, she was a new convert, and somehow in the Bible studies, the whole tithing thing and then offerings was kind of just went right over her head. And she was in the lobby of the church. Now, the glass doors were closed to the sanctuary. We were having Sabbath school in the sanctuary. And she was in the lobby talking to Janice, our head deaconess. Suddenly, you hear this really loud, "You give how much?" Everybody in the Sabbath school turns around, looks over there. What's going on? There is a sticker shock to that, But what does God promise here? Look at this neat text here in verse 12. The Lord will open to you his good treasure, the heavens, to give the rain to your land in its season. Now, I don't know if my daily life is not ruled by whether or not it rains. Most people today aren't, but there's a group of people here in Montana who would like to claim that text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then there's the next part of it that says, and he will bless all the work of your hands. Yeah. That's the part that we need to.
Yeah, that's one I like that one there too. But there's farmers here. And most of Montana is what we call dry farming. Dry farming is there's no irrigation. And that's a better way of doing it if you can, because when you pull water out of the ground, you're going to be bringing a certain amount of salt. And then you're spraying that, limited amount of salt over the soil, but you do that for 30 years. You've started to increase the quantity of salt in your soil. So if you can dry farm, you're better off. Yeah. Now, some farmers listen to me right now. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm sorry about that, but
Well, I used to dry farm. You're spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're spot on. Yeah, if you draw water up out of the ground too often, your soil becomes saturated with minerals.
Yeah.
And then they have to offset it with other minerals and then do. Yeah.
But that means a lot to our Montana farmers and any other farmer around the world, to have regular seasons of that. And so God was saying that he was going to bless them with that. And so now, again, he wants to make sure that we are not borrowers, but instead we are lenders.
When I hear that, it makes me think of the United States. You know how we always borrow money and not borrow, but give money, we lend money. But unfortunately now, it seems like we have to borrow money to lend money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was never that way before.
No, yeah, God had blessed us initially, but then we had forgotten the way.
Yep, and now we have to borrow borrow to borrow, or whatever, borrow to lend.
Give.
Yeah.
The Japan is terribly, terribly in debt, and that's just the way they operate. They've gone way far, 3 times as much as the United States in debt. China is horribly in debt. The United States is beyond us. Is Germany. You know how much Germany is allowed by Constitution to be in debt? 1/3 of 1% of gross domestic product.
Really? Are they
just nothing?
Are they following that today?
Yeah, they are. They are. Oh. They're following it.
Wow. Sounds like that's an example for us.
I would love that.
Maybe we should have had something in our Constitution. Why don't they make an amendment like that?
Yeah.
Instead of getting rid of the amendments that actually matter.
I know, right?
So God he's asking us not to borrow. So, Linda, do you have anything you want to share on this one?
Well, I think that a lot of the portion of our country, probably of the world, is in debt.
Yeah.
And it seems to be pretty acceptable to be in debt. The Bible doesn't say that it's a sin to be in debt, but remember, when we're in debt, we're borrowing. I like the definition here. It says that we're living today on what we expect to earn in the future. And there's many reasons why people are in debt. One of them is just not knowing a different way of life, not knowing that there are principles that can help them to not live in debt. I think that the second is living beyond our means, and that's what we've discussed about earlier, that it's so easy to live beyond our means, to need something to be in the grocery store, and I need this and this and this for this event, and but that was a little bit beyond my budget, but this is really important, so I'm going to go ahead with it. And so that would be number 2. Number 3 is when really bad things happen to us. There can be a divorce. There can be one partner who spends a whole lot more than the other one, and then there's just a lot of unequalness in the marriage. It can be a natural disaster where there can be earthquakes and no insurance. There can be scams boy, I was scammed. One time I just about got sucked into it. And I called Tom, and he said, "No, that's just a scam. Hang up."
How much did they almost get you for?
Well, they were trying to get her some several $100s.
It was craziness. Sometimes we get scammed by ordering things online. It didn't turn out to be the fabric or the type of quality that we wanted to, and that's another type of way that we lose money. So a lot of different ways, but I think probably one of the things that hits me the most is when people are ill and have sicknesses that they can't afford.
Like cancer or something like that.
Yeah, and they have to go into debt to be able to pay for that.
Yeah, and so we don't want to be judging anybody when we find them in debt, because we don't know their circumstances.
No.
It may be obvious to us, but there's always lots of circumstances that we don't quite understand.
So true.
Ricky, we're going to look at the bottom of Sunday's lesson, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6 to 9. I think this is just a tremendous text on that moderating influence that God has in our lives to keep us out of debt. So 1 Timothy chapter 6, looking at verses 6 through 9.
All right, 6 through 9. Now, godless with contentment is...
Godliness?
Oh, godliness. Sorry, thank you. Godless.
Yeah, it's a good thing Tom corrected that.
Yeah, right? Now, godness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and to many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows.
So what are the basics humans need? He's mentioned two of them, but I would probably add another one.
Food, clothing, water.
Shelter.
Yeah. With these, you can be content, And so if we have a roof over our heads, if we have clothing that will keep us warm, and if we have food on our table, that should be sufficient.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get the idea that they have to have, a certain level of shelter or a certain level of clothing or a certain level of, well, in the world we live in, it's transportation too. I mean, we need transportation. We need all these things,
And it's also to show off. I don't care what anyone says, it's to show off. I'm doing so much good, so much better. See how well I'm doing?
Yeah.
I got this and this and that, and I think it's a show-off thing.
Well, I got to admit, in 2000, I bought a brand new truck, and I was driving around. I thought it was hot stuff,
Right.
And it does. It goes right to your head, Oh, look at me, I'm a big contractor, driving around in your big truck.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I've gotten over that, quite a bit lately, but.
Just stay humble with your van.
That's right, man.
I had to laugh reading this story about Kate Middleton, and they were talking about her, and of course, she's expected to wear something new every time she steps out, and so this statement, this article was really admiring her because it says that she recycles her clothes. I said, "What do you mean by recycles her clothes?" And I finally realized.
Wears them more than once.
She wears them more than once.
That's called recycling?
That's called recycling. I've been recycling my clothes for a whole
very
lot, Nobody's been writing an article about me, And I just thought that was the funniest thing ever.
That is funny.
But then, we look up to people like her who have to live this unreal standard to be in this position where she has to have new clothing every while, and it has to be from Louis Couture or whoever, and it's just makes no sense at all. But here we are, to be content with the things that we need in life.
Yeah.
Gosh, it would make it sound she recycles her clothes, that she's all green and for the planet and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, the more you wear that clothing, it's.
It's funny. Because I've worked up in Big Sky and some of those areas up there in the Yellowstone Club, and you got a lot of movie stars that live up there, and a lot of them are big proponents of going green, but they got these humongous houses that are 20,000 square foot, and the propane truck is delivering propane about every other week for their 1,500 gallon propane tank because it's burning huge amounts of propane to heat the house, and nobody's living in it.
Yeah.
They just keep
For
it
what,
heated
6
all year.
months? Yeah, for 6 months, no one lives.
Yeah,
right?
no one's living there.
Yeah.
But they expect everybody else, to follow along with the program. But they're, hypocritical in that aspect.
Well, if you don't have enough funds, you're out.
But it hits every one of us every day in different ways. Yesterday I was skiing, and my skis are old, and I think, well, maybe if I had skis like these people, I would ski better. I could do better,
Right.
And but to be content and to live within the means that I've been given and that I've earned, it's every day a challenge.
I'll bet you ski better than me, though.
I don't know.
Let's turn our Bibles over to Matthew 6:24. Carrie, do you have that one for us?
I do not.
Okay. Linda, do you have that for us?
I do.
Very good.
No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or else he'll be loyal to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon.
So we're not talking so much about debt yet, as much as we're talking about the experience of the human heart. And if your heart is right with God, if you're looking to God to bring happiness, to sustain you, to bless your hard work, that can go a long ways, So there's two things. There's two. You either serve God or you serve the world, and I think you can be happier with serving God.
Well, it kind of shows where your heart is by if
So-
it is really for God or if it is for money.
So how do we know if we're serving God?
Well, we can know that we're serving God by keeping his laws and his principles. Even if that means, doing with less perhaps, or not buying that thing that will make us, equal to our neighbors or whatever.
And I believe people will see it. They'll see it and they'll say, wow, he's a Christian. Because if you're not showing it, then it's worthless, I think.
Well, how does this look when you're a Christian and you've got like great wealth and you're flying around in your jet, and you're doing all these things, you got all this wealth. People almost look down on the Christian that's doing that as opposed to someone who's living within their means and
humble, leading by example.
Yeah.
Living like Christ, like he was our example.
Yeah, because it almost looks like there's a certain amount of selfishness that's involved with all of these things.
Well, but, again, we have a friend who has a private jet, and yet I know him personally, and I know what a deep Christian faith he has, and how he is very, very giving for projects around
How
the world.
much they help, yes.
Just amazing, and the hospitality they have in their home towards many people. So it's hard to tell.
I guess
Hard to
I was targeting the stereotypical.
Yeah.
Like you see some of these big preachers and stuff, and that's the image that everybody sees is that private jet right off the bat.
But he's actually helping people.
Oh my! We're very, very impressed with that, and the sweet humility they have.
That's good. That's awesome.
And they don't just hang around with people who are wealthy like they are, because there's not many people who are wealthy like they are. But
are you going to introduce me to this guy sometime, Tom?
No, but I think the point of this is that there's a difference between working hard and making a good living and making an idol out of wealth and money. I'm fascinated by a text that was actually not in Monday's lessons. It's Proverbs chapter 24, verse 4. This is so interesting. It says, by knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. The context of this is that with wisdom the house is built, and with knowledge. And so it takes a certain amount of planning and knowledge. And I'm not a real decorator, but I appreciate rooms that are beautiful. I appreciate when there's pleasant things. And so God, I think, is not attacking the riches or the pleasant things, but he's talking about when we make idols out of those things.
Are they consuming your time, your effort, your everything?
Well, and you guys made a good point. So you guys know someone personally that, and back to the private jet thing, that owns a private jet, and to stereotype him and to say that,
Wrong,
he's just being selfish is completely wrong.
Completely wrong. So loving, so kind and caring.
So look at, I'm going to read to you Proverbs. I've always loved this one, Proverbs 13:22. I always thought this was a fascinating one. Proverbs 13:22. Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. In other words, what they're saying is, what do you think this text is saying?
That a good man leaves his inheritance to his children's children.
He's been a good steward of what God has entrusted him.
He's been a good steward of what God has entrusted him. You just nailed it, Carrie. Perfect. It's not, it may not be a large inheritance or anything like that. The point is, he's being a good steward. And I think that's what God's asking us, is to be good stewards.
And there's different types of inheritances too. It could be an inheritance of a character. The character is handed down to the children and the children's children. Or the method of living. Oh, well, my grandfather did this. We often.
What about the verse that says, the children of a righteous man will not be seen in the streets begging?
Oh, I've never seen the righteous, begging,
Yeah.
Begging bread,
my father, the inheritance my father gave me is this one sentence, and I thought, and it has been a good driving force in my life. He said, "Be frugal with yourself and generous with others." And that's probably the best inheritance my father, not just what he said, but how he lived. So I think it's time for us to talk about debt in the sense that, is all debt wrong? Is all debt bad?
Well, I incurred some debt when I purchased my property. It wasn't very much. It was a manageable debt. I mean, it wasn't like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was more like tens of thousands of dollars, and I was able to pay it off. I mean, is that kind of an example of what you're driving at?
In other words, did you have to make a down payment? Did you have to?
I did.
Yeah. So, in other words, the value of the property was equal, or at least equal, to the loan.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah. So, like, for example, some of these homes that are for sale now, I mean, you have to be really well off to purchase one of them. I mean, I know in Bozeman here, and when I left California, it was the same way. I mean, you couldn't get into a home for under $400,000.
Right.
Anything decent. You had to move way out of town, many, many miles out of town, just to find something affordable.
400 would probably be a good deal right now, actually.
Yeah, well,
in
no,
Bozeman.
that was California then. Yeah, it's a good deal in Bozeman now, and it just keeps going up. And then what the market might go down. So if you buy now and the market goes down, then you're paying more than the property's worth, and so that's really bad debt.
Well, what in that case, I'm going to suggest that if you can, when it comes to purchasing a house or something like that, if you can save enough that you would cover a downturn in the market. Now, honestly, a downturn in the market is, unless it's really bad, is not going to be more than 20%. And so if you put 20% down on a house, you've basically covered the downturn, and you're not going to be leaving the bank in a lurch, so that's that. Is there anything else you might go in debt for other than
hospital bills?
Yeah. Yeah.
Credit cards, same thing.
Yeah, but in the sense of a debt that you would consider
student loans,
education.
Yeah.
Why student loans?
Well, I never got one, but
Well, I mean,
because you want to do better, you want to get a better job and do better.
Yeah, I mean, and that's sort of how we're groomed growing up too. I mean, we need to go to school. I mean, not that school's bad. I mean, we have to take everything in context here, but we are groomed to go to school, to get a degree, to do all these things, and those are good things, but they can leave a lot of people in really bad situations. I know some doctors, it takes them what is it, 6 years of school sometimes
Oh, it's
or more, and then plus the internship and everything.
it's 4
else.
years and 4 years.
Okay, so 8 total.
It's 8.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of hard work. Well, and how much time do they have to really work during their school? I mean, that we're talking. I don't know. Am I?
They'll be $300,000-$400,000 in debt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so
That's a house. That's your cheap house.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And that is something to think about and to work ahead for to help us avoid debt. Certainly to look to see how many scholarships or grants are available and what we might be eligible for. I remember as a kid growing up, my dad, when we were in grade school, he kept talking about, now someday you're going to go to college and we can't afford it right now, but we're going to be able to work so that you can. And so he bought a travel trailer for each of us kids.
Wow.
And we had them in the campground and we would rent them out by the night. And it was our job then to go clean them between clients who would come and rent them. And so, back in the day, they would rent these things for $20 a night. And that went towards our college fund. And in grade
awesome.
school, that
That's
was the way
awesome.
that we
That's a
did
great
it.
way to do things.
And then as we got to high school, he bought a mobile home for each one of us. And then this one was a bigger deal. We had to help in the process of, finding the renters. And then if they should move out, we were there helping to clean. Now, I wonder sometimes how good a job I did cleaning. I know my mom was there behind me, making sure it was all ready and up to scale.
That's
But this
awesome.
was planning for the future. And we have children. Part of the thing about having children is planning ahead for that.
Yeah, and there goes that balance that you kind of referred to in the beginning where, we want to help our children. You both kind of referred to it, but then when this, but you also, there is that struggle that does help us in our character development too. And we don't want to just rob our children of that character development. I think I was kind of guilty of that when my kids were growing up, because you want to give them everything that you didn't have. And then by doing so, you can kind of rob them of all those lessons.
Sometimes all those lessons could be hard on people, though, too.
But that's a good, what you've described, that was excellent.
The thinking ahead, that was always my
because there was still
parents,
work involved. You guys had an invested interest in that. Yeah, that was cool.
So let's say you're in debt and you have what I would call consumer debt. One of the things I include as a consumable item is a car. We personally don't. Once in my life I bought a brand new car, went into debt. I was fresh out of school and I just didn't have anything reliable to drive, so I bought one and I paid it off as quickly as I could. And but since then I've always paid cash for a car, and the reason I've done that, and it's kind of a surprise to some people because making payments on a car seems to be a normal thing, but it's a consumable. It's something that's not going to last. It's not the house you purchased or an education. It's a consumable.
And it
It's
loses
not
values.
like a business investment. It's
Yeah.
something that every time you drive it, the value probably.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is they cost what a house used to cost. It's insane.
Well, it's funny. I was watching this millionaire. He was telling, like he was giving tips on financial stuff, and he says it's financially or it makes financial sense to buy something like a Ferrari. And I'm like, a Ferrari? It's like $100,000 car. How am I going to afford a Ferrari? And he's like, well, and then he went on to explain, like, okay, so I paid, I think he paid like $100,000 for his back in the day.
Yeah.
And then like 20 years later, he could still sell it for $100,000. A consumable.
Or probably
Well,
As
that's-
long as you keep it
not-
maintained.
actually.
That's
But
not
that's-
most of our cars.
No, that's. I don't know. What would you
Yeah.
what would you guys think about my car? How would you compare it to a Ferrari? I mean, it's pretty close, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm surprised you get here each time, Gary.
So here's a fascinating text I want to talk about. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 1. Okay? Proverbs 6, verse 1. And anybody who's ready to read that, it's going to be
Oh yeah,
1 through 5.
Yeah,
So this is Proverbs 6, 1 through 5.
yeah. I think I got it here. Give me 1 second.
It's multiple verses.
Yeah.
I'll read the first one. My son, if you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. And verse 3.
So do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself. Plead with your friend. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler.
This is a fascinating text. He's talking about co-signing a loan. Your friend wants to go off and borrow money. The lenders looked at him and said, this guy's not worthwhile trusting. We can't trust him. He doesn't earn enough. He's got a bad reputation, whatever it is. And then he comes to you and says, will you co-sign the loan? In other words, you are now responsible if he fails. What does the Bible say about that?
It says don't do it.
Don't do it. I didn't know what surety meant before until actually just yesterday or whatever.
It's co-signing a loan. You know.
Yeah, you were snared by the words of your mouth. In other words, you've made a promise that, you might in the future regret.
And the thing of it is,
more than likely will regret.
I know my ex-wife, she always had me co-sign because she has bad credit. She has a spending problem. And every time I do, I don't want to. I never do. That's, I was kind of relieved when we got a divorce just because it's like, man, we always had to have a new car, a new this. And it was like, we were always in debt, going bankrupt. But I would do it. And as sure as heck, she would stop making payments and I'd have to try to make the payments. Unfortunately.
The teacher's lesson connected with this particular lesson said that 75% of people who co-sign end up having to pay the loan, pay the payments.
That's bad percentages.
She ended up eventually paying it though when she got her taxes. So.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So, would you do this for your children?
She wanted me to.
Would we do it for our children? That's a good question.
No.
Probably. Well, I would have back, 10, 15 years ago, but probably not now.
Well, I know my daughter, if I did it, wouldn't pay.
And I think my kids know that now. They wouldn't even ask.
Yeah, I had a member in a church that told me that he took $150,000 business loan out, a co-sign for his son. And in a matter of 6 months, his son defaulted. And now he found himself $150,000 in debt.
Ouch.
With nothing to show for it. So it's if the banks don't trust your son or daughter, then you haven't done a good job. Or
well, there might be a legitimate reason, is what you're saying.
In other words, take note of that. They're more experienced than you are. So be careful. It's a Christian principle not to co-sign for loans, not to go in debt for other people.
And there's a difference between, we want to help people. We want to be as supportive as we can. And the Bible says if it's within your hand to give to other people, give it. And so we want to do that, but there's a difference between that and being responsible for their loans. And God doesn't call us to be responsible for someone else's loans.
Now, Linda, you were talking to me about this earlier. So why don't you read verses 6 through 11, okay? We're in chapter 6, verses 6 through 11.
Let's see. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come upon you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man.
That's perfect.
Just the idea that God says, be like the ant. Work hard. And ants don't always they get their food for today, but they're always storing up for tomorrow. They're always making a place. They're always finding ways to save up. And so this example is the work hard part.
So, Tom, let me ask you this question. When was Proverbs written anyway? Just do you know? Do you have an idea?
3,000 years ago.
3,000 years ago. Well, I know today I've watched like a Discovery Channel or something like that, and it says that the ants they're females. 3,000 years ago, the Bible.
How did he know this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he observed. I would like to say he was inspired, but let's not hold back on Solomon. He was wise and he observed. He was very careful.
Well, and we tend to be given this image, especially with evolutionary type thinking, that ancient man was, caveman-like, and
they were dumb.
They grunted, and and to communicate, beat their women over the head with a club and dragged them into the cave by their hair and this type of thing. But in all reality, ancient man was probably a heck of a lot more intelligent than we are today.
They were way more intelligent.
A great deal more capacity.
They were able to use their whole mind. I mean, Adam and Eve, they were next to God, created in God's image.
Yeah.
We've sunk so much.
It's called devolution, not evolution. It makes a real case for creation. It really does. I mean, if you're, and that's, I think, why, they push creation, because the devil wants us to believe that we're becoming greater and greater by our own merits and without God, but the opposite is actually true.
The opposite.
And if you are in debt, this does help us. Number one, don't go into debt for somebody else. That's going to put you further in debt. And number two, I remember this preacher I knew. He had me come over and stay at their house, and I'm a morning person, but his teenage boys were not. And he would walk into the house and he would say loudly, "A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come upon you like a prowler." I love it.
Amen.
So in other words, you can get out of debt. First and foremost, it's I love this one guy. You talk about debt, and he had a blender, and he would demonstrate. He would pull out all these credit cards and pop them in a blender, and then just hit the
whiz them up.
Whiz them up.
Need a Vitamix for that one.
Yeah, and you spend more than you normally would if you use a credit card. I mean, that's just reality, and I know, well, I get 1% back. Well, I know, but you're spending 14% more than you normally would have.
They've done the math. They know what works. And
and we think free money.
They put
That's
that carrot
what we
out
think.
there.
Free money. It's free money.
Yeah.
And it's not free.
So in other words, take away the things that are causing you to spend more than you should. And the second thing is if you can have a monthly meeting or a weekly meeting going over the finances. I know for Linda and myself that really helps when we do that. And it'll always just wake you up. Wow, where's this money going?
Yeah, to be able to review everything and go through itemizing it. Find out where the money's all going.
Here's what we've made, and here's what we've spent last month, and what can we do this month?
Yeah. How can
if
I
we
make
let it
so
go,
much money and have so little?
If we let it go, if we go 3-4 months, then it can easily get out of hand.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to spend, especially with the card. I mean, even though it's your own money, like you're swiping the old debit card, but you don't actually see anything like exchanging, and you're just happily going from store to store.
You're thinking it's free money, and it's not.
Yeah. Next thing you know, you're looking at your bank statement, and you're like, holy smokes.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, turn your Bibles to Deuteronomy 15, 1-5.
Deuteronomy 15, 1-5. I got that one. Got to load the whole thing, though. All right. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release of debt And this is the form of the release. Every creditor who has lent anything to his neighbor shall release it. He shall not require it of his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Of a foreigner you may require it, but ye shall give up your claim to what is owed by your brother, except when there be no poor among you. For the Lord will greatly bless you in the land which the Lord God has given you to possess as an inheritance, only if you carefully obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe with care all these commandments which I command you today.
What do you get out of this text that is... what would you call this section here?
Statute of limitations was what it sounds like that we have our law patterned after.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have 7 years that have passed, like let's say if you owe a debt to the state, speeding ticket, parking ticket, whatever, the statute of limitation would apply to this and they would forgive you your
what
debt.
made me think of this exactly.
Yeah, but this is talking about from brother to brother, not necessarily to, and I don't know, that's part's always been a little confusing to me. So, I mean, maybe you have to kind of explain that a little bit.
Well, it's a limit on debt.
Yeah, but what about the brother to brother thing?
It being his brother versus a stranger or something?
Versus a stranger, yeah.
I think it's talking about that in our community of faith, we take care of each other, and that God did not want to see in the community of faith poverty. He wanted the church to be able to help and manage this. And it's a tough thing because no one wants to forgive a debt. But there was some kind of a system here that God set up to be able to make sure that there was no poor among God's people.
And maybe to restore relationships too, because debts can. My wife's dad was funny in this way. He says, "You want to get rid of somebody?" I can't talk like he does, but he's like, "Loan him some money."
That works pretty good. Huh?
Yeah. I always thought that was funny.
Yeah, they'll avoid you, boy.
Yeah,
they will
right.
avoid you.
That's good.
Some will. Some will come back for more.
Yeah, they will. Oh, yeah.
Some people are just shameless.
So there was a 7-year limit. So the debts were there was a limit there. The other one, and I don't have it in my brain right now, but and that is the sabbatical, in the sense of the year of Jubilee, which happened every 49 years. Linda, do you have that text?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's fine. So the Jubilee was every 49 years, and that is the land was restored to the family. And I really like that one because this was the source of income. And if your parents went into debt and had to sell their property because of whatever reason, the good news is it's not gone forever.
You're going to get it back eventually.
Your children will get it back. If not, your grandchildren will get it back. And it was ingenious on God's part. I call these two things an economic reset button. It allows people to get there. Wouldn't the First Nations people love that? Well, okay, it's our property. We get it back now.
There's been some talk about that, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just horrible what happened there. But God knew that the actions of parents could lead the children into a life of servitude. And he said, no, we have to have a system for that.
Yeah. That canceled out the debt of your fathers.
Yeah.
Which would make sense because the person who lent it, they got their use out of the land, I'm sure. Then they're gone. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's awesome.
So my son, he went to a week before Brianna passed. He went to go pay the electric bill, and they wouldn't allow him to pay the electric bill because he needed, and she was sick and she was in bed, and she couldn't be present, and they said no, unless Brianna is present, we can't give you that information, and you're not privy to it. And now after her passing, they're bugging him to pay her debt.
Funny how that works.
He's like, well, wait a minute, I'm not privy to that information, so he's got a little attitude about it, but in all fairness.
Right.
But that would apply, I guess, in generational speak too. When
I just think God's plan was awesome. That was awesome.
And the question at the bottom of Thursday's lesson here says, if you've lent people money, how honest and fair and kind are you in your dealings with them? And that's a good question, because if we've lent money to people, we sometimes feel like that, they really should pay us. And Tom and I have learned about that a little bit. We've lent money and didn't ever get it back. And I have this bit of an angst once in a while, and then he reminds me, no, that's the 7 years. It's gone.
Yeah.
That's gone.
and I think we're supposed to lend, but not borrow, and we're supposed to not want anything in return.
God has blessed. It's just
yeah.
Well, and it's funny because I've been on both sides of this scenario. I've lent money and not gotten it back, and I've borrowed money and not paid it back. And so, so I kind of like, I know both sides of the emotional spectrum of that thing, and it's really nice to be forgiven a debt. And so I always try to remember that when I'm looking at people that I've loaned money to and they haven't paid it back. And yeah, you do get those angsts, you're just like, where? Oh, wait a minute. Okay.
How much has God forgiven me? Yeah.
And that's the thing, though, because the Lord did say, I know I've read it where it talks about we are to lend, but not to borrow or even want paid back for what we lend. Once we lend it out, we consider it no more.
Well, and that should be the rule of thumb for any Christian, is to loan without expectation of getting it back.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get it back, great, but if you don't, then
we're
don't
not
let it.
Supposed to expect it back, really. Yeah.
Yeah, with not interest. I interrupt you, Tom. I'm sorry.
No. I was just thinking.
Okay.
Sometimes I sits and thinks.
I appreciate this lesson because it was really practical about some strategies that we can do if we debts, and then trying to pay off the one that's the least debt first. And we can be surprised about how quickly that can be paid off, and then use that money to pay the next one off. But there are 4 principles that kind of came forward to Tom and I in this lesson. Part of them are what came from the lesson, some from the teacher's lesson, some from our own experience. And I think that the first principle, number 1, is seek God first.
Amen.
And if we seek God first, this is praying about all of our finances. This is praying about the big things, the big purchases, the cars, the homes, the investment, business investments. This is saying, Lord, I want you in this with me. You're in our marriage together. We need you. Seeking God first. And this includes tithing, giving God first. Making God first is so important that we found as far as managing our own finances. Number 2 is get help. The get help part is to become educated, learn, seek to understand, go to the seminars about budgeting, about managing finances, get advice from tax people, get advice, all different kinds of advice, just to learn about finances, read books, learn and find out. Anything else about that one?
Do that all your life. I'm always watching and reading and learning how to handle finances better. One of the ways to do that is surround yourself with people who practice good financial behavior. I was thinking about a friend of mine up in Canada. He says, don't buy brand new snow tires. Buy used snow tires. I thought, what? Used tires? What's this all about? Well, I moved here and I discovered, there's so many used snow tires for sale. You know why? Because people move here from Florida, and a year later, his wife is saying, "I'm moving back to Florida."
This ain't for us.
And he's got 4 months on those brand new snow tires he bought. Mm-hmm. And boy, I got 3 sets of tires for super prices. So just hang around people who are smart with finance.
Learn. Number 3, make a budget and then practice it. The lesson in Friday's lesson says, be determined never to incur another debt. Deny yourself 1,000 things rather than to run into debt. This has been a curse of your life, getting into debt. Avoid it as you would the smallpox. Now, this was written a long time ago, but I thought that was good. Avoid debt like the smallpox.
Yeah.
So make a budget and practice it. This is before you do the business investments. This is before you purchase the home. This is before you go into debt for certain things that you've specifically thought about. You've talked to God about it. You've asked for help. You've sought knowledge about it. Then you practice your budget on a daily basis. We try to talk to our kids. They'd like to make some purchases. Well, how have they practiced this? And have we talked about it? And going over every category. And finally, be an ant. Like we talked earlier.
No
Just
sluggard?
the hard work. The hard work and the saving and putting amount away. So these are just 4 principles that have been really helpful to us as we try to think about avoiding any kind of consumer debt, totally. And then if we think of business investments, Lord, is this what you're calling us to do? Do we know the risk of it? Have we learned about it? And have we crunched the numbers? And then are we willing to pay the price?
Excellent.
Yeah.
That reminds me of some of the advice you'd hear from, I don't know if you guys remember Ken Hamlin used to come on the radio. He was like this financial advisor.
I've heard the name, yes.
Yeah, I think it was Ken Hamlin. Anyways, I used to listen to him all the time, and he based all his principles on biblical principles, and it really worked. It worked for him, and it can work for a lot of people.
It's our blueprint right here, right?
That's right.
Yeah, if you want to get out of debt, you can do it.
Yep. So, well, to me, this helps out. This helps me a lot, guys. And because, in my life, I've struggled with finances my entire life. It wasn't until recently that I've been able to purchase a piece of land and build a house on it. And even now, even though I'm debt free, I don't have exactly a whole lot of abundance of stuff, but I can be thankful for what I have. And that's really what God is teaching us here, isn't it? Is to be thankful for what we have. We have a roof over our head. We have lots of food. We have a car that runs, albeit, questionably.
Dude,
perhaps.
You got a lot. You got like American dream, really.
It is. And like in terms of like statistics, I'd be like one of those super wealthy, even though a lot of people might look at me, like my neighbors and stuff. Well, not my neighbors, but maybe, a little further out than my neighbors, because my neighbors are really poor. They look at me like I'm the rich guy on the block. But you
got land. You're rich.
It is. And blessings beyond belief, and that just comes from just following God and obeying his principles. And really that's the path that he wants to lead us into. And so we can't live foolish lives. It's like the person who has lung cancer because they smoke and they're unwilling to give up their cigarettes, but they're asking God to heal the cancer. I mean, they've done something that causes a great illness in their body, and that's all them. They've done that. God hasn't done that to them. They can't blame God for that, And so God is trying to lead us into better financial security too. And if we're in bad financial security, it's likely, I know there's outside circumstances like we talked about, but it's likely that it's because we've made some bad choices.
We're supposed to be example in everything that we do.
Exactly.
Just like when Jesus, when he rose from the grave, they found his stuff, his burial clothes, all folded up, all neatly and stuff, and put there on the, I don't know what you would call it, the slab or whatever.
The slab.
Yeah. I mean, the Lord is particular. He whatever we do, he wants us to be good at, to be great at, to give it our best. It don't matter what it is. It's in all things.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tom, for sharing this lesson with us. And I mean, you guys in your personal lives have been an inspiration to me personally as well. I don't want to get too mushy here, but you guys are actually a really good example of financial security. So, taking advice from someone like you guys, means a lot. And so I appreciate that and praise
awesome
God for that.
Study.
So
thank you, Tom.
It's a pleasure being invited. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, folks, for watching, and be sure and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and join us on some of our other platforms, our Facebook and our Rumble, and Belgrade SDA is one of our Facebook pages, and this will probably get uploaded to that later on. You can join us 9 o'clock Mountain Time every Sabbath morning right here, so on Prophecy Montana. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you guys.